It was the year of widespread layoffs. My employment got cut. My youngster became really sick. He became mentally disabled due to a lack of funds for therapy. I bemoaned the sky's indifference to the plight of the already stricken, but ultimately, I came to terms with my destiny and muddled through life with my wife, Lisa. I never thought I'd find an old lottery ticket. My wife's winnings from decades ago were 30,000 yen while organizing my closet. But in her diary, she had written, "The 30,000 yen from the lottery goes to my dearest husband, Nathan." The heavens crumbled around me, just because I'm not named Nathan. At the plant, Nathan oversaw our staff. She murdered me when we were in the midst of an argument. Resuming the period preceding the commencement of the mass layoffs was my experience upon reopening my eyes. Chapter 1. What is this, Lisa? Tell me, what the hell is this? You even called him your husband. Do you two have no shame at all? I tossed the lottery stub and journal at Lisa's feet, my face contorted in wrath, demanding an explanation. 30,000 yen. Back then, that money might have transformed our entire family's fate, yet she handed it away without a word. Lisa's face twitched with terror, but not because I had uncovered the truth. She was just frightened I would harm her valuable items. She grabbed them up gingerly, treating them like treasures, and asked, "Why are you rummaging through my things? Besides, it was so long ago. We've been living just fine. What's the point of bringing it up now?" My rage surged over. What's the point? Was I the one being petty? Back then, our son was very unwell. We had both lost our jobs. I was pushing myself to the bone doing odd jobs just to exist while she handed all that money to that monster. Nathan and watched our son suffer without a second thought. What sort of mother does that? Later, my kid narrowly clung to life many times. I was desperate, out of choices. I resolved to go to Nathan and beg him for aid, hoping that since our family had previously assisted him, he could lend us something in return. But what did Lisa say? Nathan is struggling too. His wife died in childbirth and he's drowning in debt. How could he possibly have any money to lend? Maybe our son was just meant to have this fate. Bullshit. If Lisa had brought that money back home, my kid wouldn't have suffered, wouldn't have ended up like that. It was never about fate. It was about her greed. I roared, "Lisa, do you think I don't know what's going on in that head of yours? You really believe he'd marry you even if he got divorced 100 times? I swear, I'm going straight to Nathan. I want to see how thick his damn skin must be living his whole life in comfort off my family's money. Doesn't he fear that? When he dies and faces judgment in the underworld, the king of hell will make him pay it all back in his next life?" When I was young, my whole world centered around Lisa. She maintained her own money for herself while my paycheck met our bills. Even the money for the lottery ticket, she begged me for it. And yet after she won, she didn't bring a single dime back home. Nathan had seen my kid suffering in the hospital several times. He watched him progressively lose himself to his sickness, and yet he had no issue utilizing the 30,000 yen to live a nice existence. To make matters worse, every time he arrived with some fruit or tonics, I was naive enough to be appreciative, believing he was a nice buddy. Turns out the real idiot was myself. I was the greatest joke of all. Lisa yelled, "You're not going. James, you hear me? Stop right there. I gave that money to Nathan willingly. Do you really have to ruin his life over this? Do you have no heart? How did I end up marrying someone like you?" Like hell, I was going to listen. I turned to storm out the door. But then Lisa, this so-called sensitive, vulnerable woman, suddenly surged at me and shoved me hard. I wasn't prepared. My skull smacked on the ground. For a minute, my thoughts was utterly blank. The only thing I could see was my mentally handicapped kid pushing past Lisa, weeping as he grabbed for me. Then everything went dark, and the next thing I heard was, "James, it's just a little money to help Nathan. Why are you being so stingy?" I snapped my head up. In front of me appeared Lisa, decades younger. The enamel water bottle, the shared dormitory, the familiar clothes. I had come back to the very beginning. Lisa added, "James, we're both factory workers with stable jobs. Nathan's wife died in childbirth and he's drowning in debt. What's the big deal if you lend him a little money? Don't be so selfish, all right?" It all came pouring back. In my prior life, this was when Nathan's wife had just gone away. He'd climbed to the rooftop of the factory threatening to jump. Everyone had talked him down, suggesting they'd pool some money together to support him through this suffering. That's why Lisa came back to beg me to lend him some money. I had been an idiot. I truly felt Nathan was suicidal. I genuinely believed Lisa's so-called compassion, and I handed over the money. And from that moment on, my family's agony began. Even after I died, I never got that money back. Lisa was still nagging, but the next second, slap. I lifted my hand and whacked her across the face. It felt nice. She was still in amazement when I smacked her again, left and right, one after the other. Divorce. You shameless, disgusting woman. How dare you crawl into another man's bed while married to me? Marrying you was the worst damn mistake of my life. Nathan wants money? Fine, let him come ask me himself. Since when does a man send another man's wife to beg her husband for money to support him? The walls in these old buildings had terrible soundproofing, but I had nothing to conceal. Lisa, on the other hand, did. Panicked, she sprang at me, trying to cover my lips. Shut up, what are you saying? You're ruining my reputation. Reputation? After all, she still cared about that. I shoved her away with a kick to the stomach, sending her crashing onto the ground. I grabbed a hold of her hair and smacked her again, the sound crisp and harsh. She curled up, gripping her face, too scared to move. I stared down at her and spat. Lisa, divorce. I want a divorce. I'm done with you. Chapter 2. Lisa glanced at me in absolute bewilderment. James, you want a divorce? Over something so trivial? If I had known you were this petty and jealous, I never would have agreed to marry you. I scoffed bitterly. That lame effort at guilt-tripping me didn't even sting as much as the remarks of the cruel manufacturing executives. With someone like her, talking was futile. The only way to shut her up was via action, until she no longer dared to open her mouth. I didn't reply. I simply began dishing her a Wang-style beating, slap after slap. If nothing else, she was sincerely committed to Nathan. Even now, after everything, she was still attempting to protect him. She was imploring me not to damage his reputation, to lend him the money. No wonder this fragile little woman had been capable of murdering me in my prior life, all for Nathan's sake. I didn't care what she said. Every time she tried to manipulate me or argue back, I gave her another smack. I wanted to see what would shatter first, her defiant lips or my hand. Eventually, she got on. She eventually shut up. But she gazed at me with genuine contempt. At last, I let her go and sank onto the floor, panting. Her voice shook. James, you've hit me enough. Just stop. I cut her off. I'm done hitting you. Now let's talk about the divorce. Our son stays with me. The house was assigned to me by the factory, so you pack your things and leave. Lisa rushed to her feet, her face twisted with wrath. James, you're not only divorcing me, but you also want me to leave with nothing? I never knew you were so heartless. I won't agree. I won't divorce you. Right now, she hadn't been connected with Nathan yet. She hadn't won the lotto. And most importantly, our youngster wasn't ill yet. I had to divorce her. I had to make money. I would never let my son undergo the same thing again. Come to think of it, Lisa had never contributed to our home. She blew through every cent of her paycheck, saying it all went toward groceries, home products, and miscellaneous expenses. Impossible to keep track of, she often said. But in truth, who was the one paying for everything at home? It was me handing out my entire salary. The more I thought about it, the angrier I grew. I delivered another smack across her cheek. Heartless? Sure, I'll be heartless. And you wasteful, shameless woman, who are you to scold me? You live off my money, eat off my money, but if I buy a pack of cigarettes, you throw a fit. Meanwhile, I have no right to ask where your money goes. Do you even have any shame? Who the hell do you think you are to say no to this divorce? I pushed forward, pressing on, my voice full with rage. Fine. If you won't agree, let's take this to your factory. Let's ask your coworkers why you show up dressed to the nines every day. Let's find out exactly where all your money has been going. Maybe the whole time I've been the fool, keeping you fed while you've been spending your salary on some pretty boy. This era wasn't like later times. Everyone in the factory knew exactly how much their co-workers made. We all resided in the same building. The neighbors all knew one another's business. If I created a scene and an inquiry started, Lisa wouldn't be able to argue her way out of it. And in this period, cheating, whether by a man or a woman, was dishonorable. If information got out, her prospects at any factory awards or promotions would go up in flames, and everyone who had been fighting for those positions would detest her for it. I knew the major layoffs were coming. But Lisa didn't. As soon as she learned I was taking this to the factory, she withered like a frostbitten eggplant. Pathetically, she implored, "James, I swear there's nothing between me and Nathan. Even if you want a divorce, at least think about our child. Do you really think he wants his parents to separate?" I hesitated. Before my son David was ill, he had been emotionally bonded to his mother. And after his sickness, he understood nothing. I could walk away from this marriage without a second thought. But David, could he truly bear it? Seeing my uncertainty, Lisa pressed her advantage. "James, a child needs his mother. You can't just—" Before Lisa could finish, a little voice cut through her words. Chapter 3. Dad, if you divorce Mom, I want to go with you. David had appeared at the doorway without our seeing. He raced up to me, gripped onto my clothing, and repeated himself. "I want to live with Dad. Dad, please divorce Mom." The minute those words left his lips, Lisa lifted her hand and smacked him hard across the face. A large crimson handprint rose out on his small face, yet his gaze remained steady. Tears welled up in Lisa's eyes. "You ungrateful brat! What did I ever do to you? How could you want your father to divorce me?" I instantly grabbed David behind me and threw Lisa to the ground. I yelled, "Who the hell do you think you are to lay a hand on my son? Listen to me, Lisa. If you ever dare hit him again, I won't lay a finger on you. I won't even yell at you. But first thing tomorrow, I'll make sure everyone in the factory knows about you and Nathan's dirty little secret." Her voice shook. I have nothing to say to a man who beats his wife. Pathetic. We had been married for decades. I knew precisely what she was thinking. She wanted to go away and avoid dealing with this. Not a chance. I chuckled. "Go ahead, Lisa. Step out that door. The moment you do, I'm heading straight to Jenny next door for a little chat. I guarantee by morning, every single person in the factory will know all about you two filthy lovebirds." Jenny was famed for her loud mouth. Anything she knew, the whole world knew. Sure enough, after I sent David back to his room, Lisa was remained stuck in place. She didn't dare go. I spoke rudely. "Tomorrow, we're finalizing the divorce, exactly as I said. I've already spared you some dignity. If you don't agree, I'll make sure things get ugly." It wasn't that I didn't want to drag out every little detail about our money and leave her with nothing. But I had more essential problems to handle. I couldn't afford to squander time. I needed to divorce Lisa as soon as possible. I had to go buy the lotto ticket. David's sickness and the approaching wave of mass layoffs, they had been stifling weights on my chest for too long. Lisa bowed her head. She still couldn't comprehend how something as easy as lending a little money to Nathan had evolved into a divorce. But my attitude was solid. With no other alternative, she ultimately nodded. That night, I pushed her to pack her stuff. She refunded the wedding fee I had paid for her. She grabbed half of whatever home things she had brought in. The next morning, we headed immediately to the civil affairs office. At this time, divorce was still an easy process. As long as both parties consented and there were no disagreements about property, it could be done in no time. And just like that, I have my divorce document in hand. I glanced at Lisa one final time and said, "Move your things out today. Whether you go back to your parents' house or wherever, I don't care. But you better tell Nathan, if he dares to mess with me again, I'll expose everything." Lisa opened her mouth as if wanting to say something, but I was already gone. I rushed directly to the lotto stall. When I checked that the winning lottery ticket was truly in today's batch, I didn't hesitate. I flung down most of my money onto the table and screamed, "Boss, I just got divorced. I'm buying every single lottery ticket here today." The stall owner and the bystanders all turned to gape at me in disbelief. I didn't care. Under everyone's scrutinizing gaze, I scooped up the entire stack of tickets. I just got divorced, I continued, voice firm. All assets have been settled. No one's going to come after me for this. I'm celebrating. I'm buying them all. Back in these days, there were no security cameras. But that was exactly the goal. By making this a public spectacle, I was guaranteeing that every person here would remember it. Because in the future, they would all function as my witnesses. Chapter 4. By the time I returned to the factory, it was nearly afternoon. I had asked Jenny to request leave for me in the morning, making no effort to disguise the reason. I was seeking a divorce. As I went in, numerous coworkers greeted me. Most of them were merely interested, but no one dared to ask directly. Then Nathan moved forward. James, I heard you divorced Lisa. Look, every couple has their rough patches. You're just too stubborn, too rigid. When dealing with a woman, you need to be more emotional and less rational. Being this controlling and nitpicky, what woman would want to stay with you? Every word out of his mouth was trying to pin the blame for the divorce on me. Oh, I hadn't even arrived to settle things with him yet, and here he was stepping up on his own. I pulled up my sleeves, preparing to beat the heck out of him. But before I could, a woman from the workplace stepped in first. She snapped, Nathan, what do you mean by that? Are you saying that we women are unreasonable? That's a sexist, backward mindset, and you should be ashamed. Then another coworker, a burly man, added, Exactly. And James is one of the most honest, hardworking men here. If there's a problem, it sure as hell isn't with him. It's with Lisa. A third worker chimed in. You don't even know the details, so why are you so quick to throw accusations, Nathan? You have a terrible way with words. I glanced at the coworkers speaking up for me, and instantly my eyes burned with emotion. In my prior life, when the layoffs occurred, everyone lost their jobs. I was so obsessed with scraping together medical bills for David that I barely had the energy to care about these connections. But now, suddenly these folks were sticking up for me. For the first time, it actually seemed like I had been granted a second shot at life. Nathan's cheeks grew pale. He wrinkled his brows, retiring step by step like a trapped mouse. He stammered, I was just trying to help. I only wanted to give him some advice. You guys are overreacting. Look at it. I have witnessed this lame charade for decades ago. It didn't work on me anymore. I stepped closer, pinning Nathan with a murderous gaze. My jaw clenched as I yelled, You want to know why Lisa and I got divorced? Fine. Let me tell you, Nathan. But before I could finish, a voice interrupted me. I'm sorry. Lisa had raced up, breathless. She avoided my eyes and immediately blurted out, It was just that James and I weren't a good match. That's all. This was her so-called absence of feelings for Nathan. I gave out a frigid laugh and dismissed the debate, but Nathan grabbed the occasion. He straightened up, furious and outraged. Lisa, why are you covering for him? Just because you wanted to do a good deed, James divorced you over money. James, even great leaders have said we should have a spirit of selflessness. We should help others. I didn't even look at Lisa anymore. I went forward and struck Nathan straight in the face. Before he could recover, I booted his knee, sending him crashing to the ground. This time he was in too much anguish to utter another syllable. I scoffed. Lisa? Doing a good deed? Oh, so taking my money and giving it to you is a good deed now? Everyone here, tell me, what kind of wife takes her husband's money and spends it on another man? The entire workplace burst into turmoil. Gasps filled the air as everyone turned to Lisa, their gazes filled with horror, judgment, and scorn. Nathan attempted to say something, maybe to explain, maybe to wiggle his way out of it, but I wasn't done. I pulled up my sleeves farther and went after him again. I exclaimed angrily, Nathan, enjoying your life as a kept man, huh? Living off a woman and now trying to mess with me? Do you really think I'll just sit back and take it? Chapter 5. Because of the fight, Nathan, Lisa, and I were all summoned to the office. The manufacturing director scowled at us, his voice severe. Fighting during work hours? What do you three think you're doing? Nathan's face was a jumble of bruises and swelling. His anguished look was so sad it was almost humorous. I bowed my head and acknowledged to interrupting the workplace, but refused to apologize for punching Nathan. The director had already heard the complete tale from the other staff. Because of it, he couldn't come down too harsh on me. He sighed heavily. You three hold iron rice bowl jobs, stable, respected positions. Do you know how many people envy you? And now, just when we're about to evaluate for promotions, you pull this nonsense. What do you want me to say? He slapped his hand into the desk. The water in the enamel thermos rattled and splattered upon the surface. Nathan instantly grasped the chance to protest. Director, look at my face. He beat me up so badly. You can't just let this slide. James is a bully. He has to apologize and pay for my medical expenses. The director's expression clouded. What, Nathan? After everything you've done, you have the audacity to demand compensation? You ruined the factory's reputation. And you, James, you're hot-tempered and reckless. You two are both problems. There will be consequences. With that, he made his decision. James, you'll have half a month's wages deducted. Lisa and Nathan, 2 months' wages deducted. Why? The two of them spoke in unison, one out of anxiety, the other out of wrath. The director narrowed his eyes. Why? Because if word about your little scandal spreads, it'll reflect poorly on all of us. His tone was firm. This wasn't up for discussion, but I didn't have time to squander. No one here knew it yet, but in just 1 month, this factory, seemingly thriving, would be combined with another. A tremendous wave of layoffs would follow, and I would be one of the workers let go. More crucially, in 2 weeks, David would start displaying indications of his condition. I had came here today prepared to quit regardless. I needed to cash in the lottery ticket and take David to obtain medical care. In my prior life, the physicians had informed me David's sickness was curable, but the local hospitals didn't have the requisite resources. Back then, I could barely scrape together enough for basic therapy, much alone purchase a full cure. But this time, I had a chance. And I wasn't going to let my son endure another lifetime. I couldn't keep taking leave. Resigning was the only choice. So I responded, Director, if they're unhappy with the punishment, why don't you just fire all 3 of us? I'll fully cooperate. If I was leaving, I was taking these 2 down with me. Nathan and Lisa's features grew ghastly pale. They looked at me like I had lost my mind. Even the director grimaced disapprovingly. James, don't act on impulse. You need to think things through. This is a stable job. Where else will you find another one like it? Look, how about this? The money deducted from their wages will be given to you as compensation. I shook my head. I turned and gazed at Lisa and Nathan with sheer loathing. Director, I can't work under the same roof as these 2 anymore. I came here today specifically to resign. I'll also move out of the factory housing. I just need a few days to sort things out. Seeing that I couldn't be convinced, the director let out a heavy sigh. Fine. Collect your last paycheck. He stopped before adding, but James, Lisa, and Nathan will stay. Everyone is struggling. I nodded. I had no intention of pressing farther. If they were dismissed, Lisa's parents would come after me for custody of David. My own parents would urge me to reconcile with her, and David didn't have time to wait. After today, those 2 wouldn't have an easy time at the factory. Their reputations were already damaged. Besides, when you have nothing to lose, you have no fear. They, on the other hand, still needed this work, and they wouldn't dare cross me again. Chapter 6. I grasped David's little hand tightly and murmured, David, don't be afraid. Dad will always be with you, okay? I straightened my back. Right now, seeing a doctor was no simple chore. Seeking care in another province needed referral documents and a mountain of processes. David hadn't showed symptoms yet. If the hospital failed to find anything, it would merely waste more time. My thoughts was in disarray, but David's little fingers clasped mine firmly. Daddy, I'm not afraid. Now that Mommy's gone, you're safe, he added. I froze and gazed down at him in disbelief. He laughed widely and said, I had a dream. Mommy pushed you down and you bled a lot. Mommy is bad. I don't want her. I only want Daddy. David knew. Could it be? Had David also been reborn? Maybe to him, all that transpired in our former lives was simply a nightmare. I nodded firmly. Yes, it was just a dream. We don't need her. To be cautious, I arranged an appointment with the same doctor from my former life. After a battery of tests, the doctor sat across from me with a somber face. It's a good thing you came early. Your son hasn't developed symptoms yet, but there's bad news. Our facilities here can't treat his condition. You'll have to go to a city. A city. That meant high medical bills, travel fees, and hotel expenses. Some folks spent their entire lives without ever leaving their province. And now I had to take David to a city for therapy. The doctor groaned, but I felt like everything had been worth it. As long as there remained hope. As long as David could be cured, that was enough. I said, "Doctor, we'll go to a city. Please help us with the referral paperwork. Thank you." The doctor paused for a second, then nodded. He provided me comprehensive directions on what to pack and what to watch out for at the hospital in a city. Every money has to be spent prudently. When we left the hospital, I brought David home to prepare for the trip. Soon, news traveled across the neighborhood. David was unwell, and I was sending him to a city for treatment. Neighbors stopped by, some giving eggs, some even donating money. I thanked them all genuinely. Then I scratched off all my lotto tickets and took them to the redemption center. In addition to the $30,000 I already knew about, I had won even more money. When I gently stated it, the rumor went through the entire alley like wildfire. After all, during this time, even persons with 10,000 yuan were considered affluent. Sure enough, that very night, bang, bang, bang. There was a loud tap on my door. I opened it to see Lisa. She squeezed her lips together, mute. Just as I was going to close the door in her face, a foot unexpectedly wedged into the doorway. "Brother Wang, I heard you won a few tens of thousands in the lottery. Congratulations!" Nathan pressed his way forward, beaming as if we were long-standing friends. All his old hatred had evaporated. Grinning shamelessly, he said, "Brother? Wang, you're not being very fair. Even though you're divorced, half of that lottery money still belongs to Lisa." I scoffed. His eyes were virtually blazing with hunger. Did he honestly believe I didn't know what he was after? If Lisa got the money, it would go right into his hands. Leaning against the doorframe, I barred them from entering and raised my voice for the whole neighborhood to hear. "Lisa, is that money yours? Let's ask the neighbors. Everyone knows David is sick, but you, his mother, didn't even ask about him. And now you show up to steal your son's life-saving money. Do you even deserve to be called a mother?" Lisa averted my look, her eyes bent low. In a quiet voice, she said, "How much money do you really need for medical expenses, James? We bought that ticket before we divorced. Half of the winnings belong to me." I almost laughed out loud in surprise. Lisa had fully cast aside any last trace of shame. Chapter 7. The following minute, Nathan's mother came. She put on a phony senior charm portraying the wise old woman. "Young man, listen to me. A couple may be divorced, but 100 days of marriage still carries deep ties. You can't possibly spend all that money alone, so why not give your wife half? Even if you can't be husband and wife, you can still be friends." How entertaining. The son was shameless and the mother was just as thick-skinned. Nathan joined in. "Brother Wang, since you're so well off now, why not lend me some money? Or better yet, just give Lisa her half, and she can lend it to me." With that, the three of them tried to fit into my house. I blocked the entry. Inside, David had heard the ruckus and come out to aid me. As I held the door, I observed our neighbors looking out of their homes. I shot David a glance. David was smart. Without wasting a beat, he dropped into the ground and started sobbing. "Bad people. You're all bad people. You're trying to steal Daddy's money. Mommy, I don't want to die. Please don't take my life-saving money. Mommy, please. I don't want to die." His voice was piercing, filled with desperation and despair. And just like that, people flooded out of their homes to see what was going on. I shoved Nathan's mother, making her stagger back. Nathan, frightened, tried to shove me in back. But before he could even lay a finger on me, I sank onto the ground myself, trembling. This age was different. People weren't used to witnessing this type of situation. Instantly, a crowd formed. Shouts of fury arose. "Lisa, Nathan, what the hell are you doing? Bringing your lover here to beat up your own husband and son? Even tigers don't eat their own cubs. How can you call yourself human? This is all about money, isn't it? Look at these two, thick as thieves. They don't even care about their own flesh and blood. We should report them for immoral conduct." "James, David, don't be afraid. We're all here. No one is going to take your money," I smirked. Now they were utterly damaged. With so many people watching, the three of them instantly shifted tactics, trying to argue their way out of it. But their statements all boiled down to one thing: money. What they didn't understand was that when I bought the lotto tickets, I had purposefully made sure everyone saw my divorce document. My funds were clearly divided. Thanks to my big spender conduct that day, the stall owner had a strong image of me. Everyone who heard about my victories understood that I bought the tickets after the divorce with my own money. Not even a single dime belonged to Lisa. I scoffed. "Lisa, I thought you simply betrayed me. But now I see you're willing to sacrifice even your own son's life for money." I jumped up and smacked Lisa across the face. Then again, and again. Pa, pa, pa. This time I wasn't acting. David had endured so much in his prior life. And at the end of the day, it was my own weakness that had failed him. Even as Lisa pushed me to my death, my final thoughts had been about him. What would happen to my kid if I died? People believe that a child is a mother's heart and soul. But Lisa, she didn't care about her own son. She was prepared to take his life-saving money and deliver it to another guy. I would never understand why. The memory of David being humiliated, bullied, and isolated in our prior existence blazed in my head. I lost control. I hit her harder. The bystanders stared, their expressions black with wrath. Not one person stepped in to aid her, because if they dared to fight back, the crowd would rip them apart. Then Nathan made a deadly error. Through clenched teeth, he hissed, "Spending $30,000 on a kid's treatment. As if that'll cure him. You might as well just have another one." The instant those words reached my ears, something inside me broke. Nathan had just attempted to run, but I had already heard everything. My entire body trembled with wrath. I dropped Lisa quickly and lunged at Nathan. I placed my arm around his throat, suffocating him. His eyes slid back as he struggled, his hands grasping at my arms. I strengthened my hold. "You worthless piece of garbage," I shouted. "You can have Lisa, this pathetic excuse of a woman, but you will not lay a finger on my son's life-saving money. Anyone who tries to block my son from getting treatment, anyone who dares steal his money, I will kill them. You have such a filthy mouth. Fine, then never speak again." Nathan gasped and gagged, his face turning purple. Chapter 8. The instant the neighbors pulled me back, I let go of Nathan. He gulped for oxygen, holding his throat while Lisa held him. The two of them stumbled away, hobbling as they went. I waved farewell to the neighbors and started off with David. David, still so little, snuggled against me. Every time I glanced down at him, he would flash me a dazzling smile, far too understanding for his age. It was heartbreaking. After several days on the train, we eventually arrived at A City. David was successfully admitted to the hospital, and only then did half the weight on my chest lift. When the test results came back, the doctor affirmed that surgery was viable and David could be cured. I couldn't keep back my tears. I gripped David's small hand and said, "David, be good, okay? Dad has to go out and make money, so don't run around." After making sure David was calm, I pulled out some money and requested an adjacent patient's family to keep an eye on him while I was away. Then I left the hospital. On the train trip here, I overheard talks about private firms starting to emerge in major places like a city. I had no unique talents, no cheat codes, only knowledge of the future. And my target, the largest garment wholesale market in a city. I couldn't create music as in those time travel scenarios. The stock market hadn't even been piloted yet, and even when it did, I had never paid attention to it in my former life. Most critically, my funds were restricted. Clothing was an industry with an entrance cost I could afford. Plus, after Years of observing trends, I had a fair idea of fashion's trajectory. If I could get a city's current trends at wholesale costs, then transport them back home where travel was still tough, the garments would still be in fashion when they arrived. But reality wasn't as easy as the novels made it appear. I had to visit the market several times before I eventually had an opportunity to test the waters. Once I built up demand, I landed a contract. During David's hospital stay, I worked tirelessly, sketching designs day and night. The instant I made one link, I leveraged it to open other doors. I grasped every chance. I had to. David was still young, his therapy was timely, and ultimately, after nearly a month in the hospital, he was discharged. The medical expenditures had stolen a portion of my money, but I had also earned a profit. Every day, I hauled enormous sacks of garments around the streets, drawing attention. To prevent extra difficulties, I hired a competent truck driver through a local clothes firm to handle long-term deliveries. Back home, the plant had already been combined and our old building had been recovered. I brought David straight to buy a home. The future city core wasn't much yet, therefore the costs were inexpensive. I clinched my teeth and acquired a business property too. Not outright, but on a loan. Before long, my former co-workers and neighbors learned I was returning. Even though they had lost their employment, they nonetheless brought whatever little they could to visit David. I inquired, "Jenny, have you found a job yet?" My heart boiled with an idea. Selling garments alone wouldn't be simple, but I had worked with these guys for years. I understood their skills and character better than anyone. If I could recruit them, not only would I have trustworthy labor, but I could compensate them for their compassion. Jenny groaned and shook her head. "It's not that easy, James. Things are tough right now." I grinned. "Jenny, come work for me. Bring your son and daughter-in-law too. I'll pay you." "This much?" I held out a figure and Jenny's jaw fell. Before she could refuse, I continued, "Jenny, I rented a store. My stock will arrive in a few days. I'm not just giving you free money. I need your son to handle deliveries, your daughter-in-law to be a model, and you to take her out and show off the clothes. If anyone asks, tell them where to find our shop. I trust your mouth." No matter how fashionable the garments were, they still required advertising. And Jenny's mouth. The instant she informed folks the garments originated from a city, she could hype them up like they were the best jewels. Within a few days, my little nameless boutique had become the trendiest shop in town. Chapter 9. With my shop booming, I expanded. I submitted my formal wear designs to a manufacturer with the condition that they enable me to start a branch store under my name and synchronize all clothes shipments to me. I anticipated that soon others will build apparel shops as well. But my goal: use a city's reputation to solidify my first mover advantage. With the firm developing, I employed even more of my old coworkers, accountants, models, security guards. Wong Clothing has become a well-known brand in town, and my heart, it was finally at rest. My son David merely needed to live a happy, healthy life. But as the proverb goes, the more famous a pig, the more likely it is to get slaughtered. Lisa's parents gained wind of my accomplishment and came knocking, with Lisa in tow. Sarah put on her best fake motherly smile and cooed, "James, we never even knew about your divorce. I always knew you were a good son-in-law destined for great things. No matter what Lisa did, she was still your first wife. You can't abandon the woman who stood by you when you were poor, right?" Her greedy eyes scanned the clothing racks as her hands fondled the fabric. She added, "I already scolded Lisa for her mistakes. Come on now, why don't you two just go and get remarried? Life will be wonderful again." Huh. Wishful thinking. Richard cleared his throat, staring at my expression. Seeing that I wasn't convinced, he altered tactics. "James, even if you don't want Lisa back, David still needs his mother. How about this? Just arrange jobs for us? That way, Lisa can stay close to David and raise him properly." Oh, did they hope that by starting with a little request, I'd finally agree to the large one? I cocked an eyebrow and said, "And what kind of jobs were you thinking?" Sarah's face brightened up with delight. Even Lisa perked up at the prospect. She promptly put forth her requests. "Well, I should get the same salary as Jenny, your father-in-law too. As for Lisa, she should manage your accounts." After all, it's such a big business. You can't just trust outsiders, right? Lisa is David's mother. Who else would guard your fortune better than her? I nearly laughed. Really, Jenny had been with me since day one. She was my top salesperson, essentially the face of my brand. And they believed they earned the same salary, and they wanted to handle my money? What type of crazy fantasy was this? I chuckled. You can have janitor jobs, manager, out of the question. Take it or leave it. Lisa's head jerked up. James, they're my parents. You stole my $30,000 and I didn't even say anything. Isn't it only right for you to take care of them? And besides, David isn't even sick. Why are you still holding grudges? Ah. So now she was back to saying the money was hers. Looking at her younger self, I feel like giving her a slap. Seeing her aged, I feel even more like unleashing 18 types of Chinese kung fu on her. Between us lay a life and death enmity. That wasn't something a few words could erase. I frowned. Lisa, are you insane? You dare to curse David? To become sick again? What kind of shameless two-timing tramp are you? Around us, my employees, our erstwhile neighbors, watched with confused faces. After all, everyone here knew the truth. Lisa had never touched a dime of the $30,000. How was it hers? And David, he was completely well. When had he ever been sick? She was spewing rubbish. With no argument left and no numbers on their side, Lisa and her parents slunk away in embarrassment. But I wasn't foolish. My business had been growing for a time now. Why had they only just turned up now? I have someone check into it. And sure enough, I discovered something. After our divorce, Lisa had gotten involved with Nathan. The two had gone to the hospital together before meeting each other's parents. It was evident. Either they wanted my money, or Lisa was pregnant with Nathan's child and seeking for an idiot to raise it. If this attempt failed, they would try again. Well, since they were so madly in love, I would make sure they were bonded together forever. With money, everything was possible. After days of observation, I eventually caught them alone together. A single fire didn't burn the home down, but it did burn their reputation to the ground. Lisa attempted to conceal her face, but she couldn't hide her exposed body. Nathan was in just as awful a situation. I clapped mockingly. Well, isn't this my ex-wife? Just a few weeks ago you were begging me to take you back, and now you've already found a new man, a divorced woman and a lifelong bachelor? How perfect. Congratulations. Lisa's face froze. This sealed their destiny. Once their relationship became formal, there was no way she could come crawling back to me or take my money. Last life I had endured. David had suffered. But this time, she might rot with that freeloader Nathan and raise his child. I was going to like this program. Lisa panicked. She clutched my arm, imploring, "No, James, please believe me. Nathan got me drunk and took advantage of me. I was confused. I only love you. I am your wife, David's mother. Please don't leave me." Nathan's face twisted. He was a lifetime bachelor. If Lisa left, he'd lose everything. He instantly pulled her back and exclaimed, "Lisa, how dare you say that? You're already pregnant with my child. What do you mean I took advantage of you? Don't try to push the blame onto me." Lisa's eyes widened in terror. She strained fiercely, attempting to get free of Nathan's clutches, but amid the chaos, she lost her equilibrium. She slumped to the ground. "Ah!" Lisa yelled. Her hands gripped at her stomach. "My baby! My stomach! It hurts!" Chapter 10. Lisa was brought to the hospital. The baby was gone. At the police station, the Liu family and the Ito family, Nathan's side, got into a full-blown battle. Lisa's family asked that Nathan accept responsibility and marry Lisa, forcing him to officially commit himself to her. And just like that, the two were officially bonded together. No wedding, not even a single piece of celebration candy was handed out. But I was satisfied. David was healthy. My business became bigger and greater. For David's education, I sent him to the top schools. Every year, I made sure he never missed a medical checkup. Who needs both parents when a mother like her was worth less than a pile of money? David was excellent. His grades were superb, and he earned his way into the greatest institutions. Finally, I got to witness him marry the lady he loved. Something I never even dared to dream about in my prior life. As I saw his wedding vehicle go away, suddenly, a person jumped onto the road. They faltered, slid, and fell face first onto the concrete, blood streaming onto the street. Someone mumbled, "Ignore it. Ignore it." That person is a professional scammer. They've cheated so many people out of money. Another paused. But that fall looked real. Then an old man broke out from the throng, begging for money. "My wife? You hit my wife. Pay for her medical bills." A basic scam scenario. Without hesitation, I contacted the cops. With dashcam evidence and witnesses, it had nothing to do with us. But this time, the fraudster wasn't hauled away by the cops. They were hauled away by an ambulance, because this time the fall was genuine. As our car slowly passed past, I caught a glimpse of the bleeding man laying on the ground. It was Lisa. David saw my glance. "Dad, what are you looking at?" I reached out, straightening his suit. With a placid grin, I responded, "Nothing. I was just thinking, you and your wife must be happy." As for Lisa, she had no place in my son's life.